I click the links for Odyssey, Bit Chute. Join the channel, become a member, or support channel like off CashApp. Crypto with the various other ways. Thank you for the recent donations. Or join the Telegram, which is freaking wild. We've got to regulate Telegram. There's way too much free speech on Telegram. Yeah, I like free speech. I know a lot of people who like free speech. You're going to get some, salty language, but that's you're also going to get the true open marketplace of ideas. So, Biden, the deer aren't wearing Kevlar. Hey, you idiot. The Second Amendment's not for hunting deer. And it's not for self-defense either. It's for deleting tyrants. You stop tyranny by killing tyrants. That's the point of the Second Amendment. And it's funny, if you went through the writings of the Founding Fathers, now you'd probably have the FBI knocking on your door. Hey, this is just a safety check. We're just gonna check in on you and make sure everything's okay. We heard you reading some crazy writings. Oh yeah, the writings of the Founding Fathers. Oh well, that was written a long time ago, and now it's dangerous. Really? Oh. Seems like those Founding Fathers were prescient. Seems like they warned us about all this stuff happening. Like, yes, all this is really happening, and nobody is going to turn this around but you. Form clubs. Form local neighborhood watches. Are you trying to say form militias? Yeah, sure. Yeah, but don't call it that. Just call it neighborhood watches or clubs or something. Just, in groups. Whatever. Biden and Matthew McConaughey. So he gives a long speech, and he mostly says nothing in this current speech, but then a few years ago he gave a speech about liberty device control. And that's what those things are. They're liberty devices because they prevent tyranny and they procure liberty. They're not for self-defense. They're not for hunting deer. And he's talking, of course, about the tragedy in Texas. 20-odd people, 22 people, I think, were removed from this mortal coil. And it sucks to have to use euphemisms, but it's YouTube's just a heartless algorithm that doesn't know anything. Keep in mind, Detroit, Chicago, Memphis, Oakland, there's a top dozen cities. Detroit and Chicago are usually in the top 5, though, to be fair. Those are horrible, horrible places. Ever since, those cities have always been heavy-hitting cities. Ever since 2020, those numbers have gone through the roof for a couple of reasons. One of them is the big push to decriminalize things and defund the police things. And before they even went through with it, the psychological change was in the air, so people started to hear that. And holy cow, Detroit suddenly went from the numbers started, Detroit, Chicago, all those cities, the numbers started ramping up because they realized, they really are trying to push to defund the police and no jails and no cops. And it's like, so what happened? Oh, the malum in se acts, the evil in and of themselves, those increased right off the hook. I think Chicago 2021 was 850 removals from this mortal coil. It's just gonna get more and more and more. And the funny thing is, it peaked in the late 80s, 1990, and then it dropped off drastically, probably because somebody passed a crime bill probably around that time. It is not even at those levels yet, and it's off the hook. The difference is now you're seeing all of this stuff because everyone has a cell phone and there's security cameras. You can you can get a half dozen security cameras around your house for under $1,000 and record everything in night vision and 1080. And people got Ring doorbell cameras. Ring doorbell cameras are probably the more useful kit because you want your cameras low and pointing up, so when people hold their heads down, you can see the face as they hold them. People are seeing all this stuff, and we're not even at the 1990 levels yet. But oh my gosh, we are going to get there and blow right past it until somebody pushes until you get a Hillary Clinton to go out there and give her super predator speech. Yeah, the Hillary Clinton in 1994 was more base than any politician publicly alive today. That's how far that window has shifted. Hey, Biden in back 30 years ago was more base than any Republican today. That's how far things have shifted. It's just things are going to get so much worse. You go, oh well, they'll just do what they did in the 90s. They'll pass a crime bill. Okay, well, the window of America has shifted further, much, much further left. So the probability of them getting serious on crime is much decreased. and they probably will. But there's a big push. I mean, you literally have people in Congress who, like Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi just doesn't know what's going on. AOC, the squad of these people who are, like, they are really on board with defunding the police because they don't live in those neighborhoods. They don't have to worry about it. The funny thing is, you got a lot of like liberal people who are saying, are pushing all this kind of nonsense. But then you ask people who are actually in the neighborhoods affected by this. They go, oh yeah, they want to defund it. You're in some suburb of Detroit where it's just a living hell. And they go, these white liberals want to defund the police in your area. What do you think about that? I'm like, are you insane? Are you absolutely insane? They want better police. We all want better police. Police held accountable. They didn't want to defund the police. The vast majority of people did not want to defund the police because it would just be, you just have warlords of Liberia running around, which is what you're getting right now. Anyway, so Matthew McConaughey, just another useful idiot. But he's vaguely moderate. No, they're all owned and controlled by these Soros, Schwab, Rothschilds types. They're all under the thumb. If they're not, I kind of know how to say this, actively politically incorrect, like they're not actively waving a flag that says we're not your guy, we're not your cattle, then they're cattle, which is where the Dan Crenshaws and a bunch of those other people are. We're going to go to Ukraine. Why don't you go to the American border to the south? Shut up, bigot. Hey, Biden, you're gonna go visit Waukesha? Shut up, bigot. Hey, Biden, you're going to go to the border? Nope. You're going to do what's useful to do. So this is Salvador Ramos. Obviously, he's a Mexican guy, or Honduran or something like that. And, it's not really, like, this kind of event is not really a Latin thing, so it's not like people are mad at that group of people so much. It's just, he's just though he does look like Richard Ramirez, he's a legitimately organically schizophrenic guy. He took out his own grandma first, and then he went to the school, and it's like he wasn't just going after his bullies, which I'm not saying you can understand that, but people can wrap their heads around that concept. He went after kids, so it's like this guy, it's not a political statement for this guy, he's just organically crazy person. Mental health, they go, oh, hey, Reagan defunded mental health. It's like, so you got 50 states in America. Why didn't some of the 50 states start refunding mental health at a state level? Shut up, bigot. Look, shiny object, get distracted. No. Let's go back to this issue. Why didn't the 50 states fund mental health? Because if we don't fund it, they'll just end up homeless, and they're not our problem anymore. So the homeless population explodes because you didn't fund mental health. It means you got to put money for mental health hospitals, prisons. And, to be fair, it also deals with involuntarily committing people after due process, but people who have got some serious issues, and it's like, well, yeah, but, you leave them on the street, they're going to push people in front of trains. So there's a you live in a society, and there's going to be a balancing of power between people's individual liberties and preventing people from being pushed in front of trains. It's like, so what do we have now in New York and other major cities? Oh, catch and release. So literally violent felons, they might be on a GPS monitor, but they're catch and release. Yeah. So the Founding Fathers never envisioned a nation where Soros would literally appoint DAs that would get in office, and there'd be shootouts between gangs, and the DA would say, oh, it's mutual combat. Oh, yeah, so Soros paid for your campaign $600,000. The other guy raised $130,000 for his own campaign, which would be a reasonable amount of money to raise for a campaign. But Soros just effectively placed you in office, and it's like, oh, yeah, there's no fighting that until you fight that. You can't just, oh, well, it's just a democracy. It's a constitutional republic. Yeah, but you've got somebody who's effectively selecting leaders. You might want to do something about that. Oh, but he's, if he can pay DAs $600,000 to $1 million for some people in office. Well, why isn't Congress doing anything? It's like, well, why is Nancy Pelosi worth over $100 million? Shut up, bigot. Look, shiny object. No, you're not going to vote your way out of any of this. That ship has sailed 50 years ago. I got to be careful here, but the quote from Stalin about that issue, You didn't vote your way into it, so you're not going to vote your way out of it. So, form local clubs. Peaceful, legal, constitutionally protected activity, literally in the First and Second Amendment. Assembly and militias, and all the other stuff. So he's this useful idiot makes a couple of quotes, and he says something about hunting ducks with the 12 bore, and he goes, yeah, you can only have 3 rounds to hunt a duck. Yeah, it's a hunting regulation, because I guess ducks are probably a limited species of duck or something. So the 12 bore can only hold 3 rounds or something like that. I don't know. I thought they were double barreled. I don't know about hunting duck. So that's a hunting regulation. And you don't use a double barrel or a pump, a 12 bore, to defeat tyranny. I guess in World War One they did for trenches. I mean, they have their uses for sure. But that's not what the Second Amendment is for. This is a hunting regulation. The Second Amendment is for tyranny. It's not even for self-defense. It's not for self-defense or hunting. It's for killing tyrants. To stop tyrannical authoritarian dictators. That's what the Second Amendment is for. And he makes another quote. This is he made a comment just recently where he just made a long spiel, and he didn't actually say anything. But then they're going back to this. This is his statement. It's like he doesn't actually say anything. It's just, we need to be better as a people. It's like, we didn't do this. Keep in mind, the country's 1/3 of a billion people. It's a horrific tragedy because it's a horrific tragedy, but involving kids, it's like that will, get to you. But the stuff that happens in Detroit and Chicago on every weekend also inadvertently involves kids, because when those guys are just blasting at each other, they're not hitting their targets. Those Liberty pellets, they go for hundreds of meters, and they wind up going through sheetrock and hitting some kid in the head, like all the time. Some little they're at a cookout, and some guy will just let fly at a cookout. It's like, well, there's little kids there. Oh, so you deleted 7 little kids. It's like, oh yeah, so they weren't aiming; they were just letting fly. It's like that happens every weekend in Chicago and Detroit. I go, oh, why doesn't the media cover it? Why don't our representatives cover it? Well, what do you think? Why do you think they don't cover it for Detroit and Chicago? It doesn't give them any political ammunition, no pun intended, to cover that kind of stuff, because it's the wrong people doing it. They can't make hay about this. Listen, if it was a fair-skinned guy who did this, you know what they'd be talking about, because this guy is very clearly a brown guy. And it's not a brown issue, because, like I said, they don't really do this kind of stuff. In fact, here's the thing with mass events like this, they're actually pretty rare in America. Like the most of the Malum and Say events are the stuff I've been talking about. Detroit and Chicago, it happens every weekend. It's just like, 3 this weekend in Miami, 10 in Chicago, and 9 in Detroit. It's like that happens every weekend. It just gets ignored because you boil the frog. And if the media reported on that every weekend, it's like, oh, hey, another 7 people in Chicago were blasted. Oh. And it's like the same faces. It's like, oh, America has an issue with this, but America doesn't want to deal with this issue because it's not politically correct. And we've been told that blonde people are bad. It's like, yeah, but they're not. They're just not doing any of this kind of stuff. I'm not saying they're awesome. I'm not saying they don't occasionally do this stuff, but the numbers just are different. You've got to look at like numbers as a percentage of the people there. And it's like, oh, that's why we're ignoring Detroit and Chicago. And it's like you do a tremendous disservice if you're the elected representatives of those cities to those people, because their sons and daughters and mothers and fathers are getting blasted every weekend. And nobody's doing anything about it because it's not politically correct to talk about it. And you hear how careful I have to be to try to get this past the YouTube algorithm. It's like, oh, you were a little too honest, so we're just going to delete your channel. Oh, okay, so that viewpoint's not getting out there on Google. Yeah, Google doesn't want these viewpoints out there. Oh, okay. Anyway, so he makes the other comment about magazine limits for the 223, which is kind of a common liberty device. The state doesn't have magazine limits. You should have any device that the state has, and there should be no rules or regulations on them, because the goal is not self-defense. If the state has 30, 40 round magazines, then you need to have 30, 40 round magazines. Whatever the state has, the people should have, because the goal of the Second Amendment was to kill tyrants by stopping the agents of tyranny. Now, this frank discussion, if I had a bigger platform, it would get eyeballs from three-letter agencies. Like I can say almost anything I want because it's a small platform, but like literally to quote the founding fathers, it's like, oh, that's a dangerous extremists. Oh, so the founding fathers really were right. Like tyranny will creep in if we don't stop it. It's like we just sat back, sports ball, bread and circuses. We just, I just want to watch my TV. I gotta watch my shows and drink some high fructose corn syrup. Like, oh, tyranny did creep in. Yeah. Hey, California and New Jersey, New York, how are you going to fight tyranny with like 10-round magazine limits? Does the state have 10-round magazine limits? Do the criminals? If you take liberty devices away from free citizens, so only criminals in the state, which oftentimes will amount to the same thing, are the only people who are going to have those devices. So how do you stop tyranny? With if you're in New York and you have a 9-round limit, how do you stop tyrants? Oh, you don't. You're just subject to that tyranny. Too much for YouTube? I don't know. I'll upload it. I'll give it a shot. Maybe it'll be okay. Like, comment, subscribe, support channel on the various links, if you will, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.